It all begins one day at school when Hidaka gets approached by Siki and Kita, his classmates, who then orders him to get some juice for them. Since he's the customer of the month at the Bully Club, he asks for their preferences like a good servant and accepts the money. So Hidaka leaves the class and heads to the school rooftop, throwing himself a pity party. Suddenly, he heads to the edge and jumps since he has lost the will to go on living. As he falls, Hidaka recalls the faces of his classmates who probably wouldn't even realize he's gone. Suddenly, he finds himself in the presence of a king and some elders. Surprised, Hidaka realizes his classmates are also present. While the king introduces himself as Johans, the king of Greyburg, Hidaka wonders why his entire class followed him into the afterlife. Just then, Johans explains that the country summoned them as heroes with statuses and skills to end their endless wars with magical entities. Just then, Siki accuses Johans of kidnapping them and gets ready for a fight. But Akijo makes him realize they are outnumbered and suggests they hear the king out. Afterwards, Johans reveals that each of them has received an occupation, and that those with the occupation hero are especially gifted. On checking his status, Siki realizes he's a sage, impressing a lady who then points out that he belongs to the top class of knights. Moving on, the lady checks out Akijo's status and realizes he's also a hero. Thinking he might be luckier in this life, Hidaka checks out his status. However, to his surprise, he realizes he's just a healer, which the lady explains to be the weakest of all classes. On hearing this, Siki insinuates that a mascot should have been summoned instead of Hidaka. Afterwards, the lady explains that they'll get everyone trained in a school and asks them to get on a portal where they'll be transported to their dorms. Siki then faces Hidaka to roast him some more, making the poor dude wonder why even death wouldn't give him a break. So when he asks if bullying him is that fun, Siki gets hands-on with him. However, Hidaka says he's not going anywhere with the rest of them. Annoyed by this, the lady says she has decided to transport him somewhere else for being just a healer. While the other students wonder what that means for him, the lady explains that it could be anywhere, and she has no way of predicting where it is. Thinking she was doing it for him, Hidaka thanks her. But the lady states that he misunderstood her and angrily blames the glitch in their summoning system for bringing them a nincompoop. After this, she accuses Hidaka of wasting their efforts and adds that he'll pay for it with his life, making Hidaka wonder why the gods of plot wouldn't stop screwing him, so he angrily threatens to destroy the country and end everyone in it. Not long after this, he finds himself wandering in darkness and wonders where he is. Suddenly, he spots some treasure boxes, and on checking them out, he finds a small bottle which he thinks might be poison. While he debates with his instincts, a voice tells him to drink until the last stop since he wants more power, so he drinks up and instantly regrets it as he faints. Then, Hidaka awakens in the underworld and wonders why he doesn't feel any different after taking the potion. After this, he realizes his vision just got better and figures he blacked out for just a night vision ability. On realizing he's yet to open up one box, he reaches for the box, but it suddenly opens up with fangs and takes a chunk out of his arm, making Hidaka scream in agony. Suddenly, the monster rises and tries to snack on what's left of him, but Hidaka takes to his heels and, on getting away, he tries to heal himself. After berating himself for being of the weakest class, Hidaka discovers that he has acquired a unique skill from drinking the god of revenge's secret medicine. Curious, he checks out the mischievous reversal ability and realizes it can flip the state of its target from positive to negative. The voice then announces that his healing magic technique has been reversed into a technique called waves of erosion. So, Hidaka realizes he could generate waves that could take the life force of anything it touches, so he heads back to the box room. As he reaches for the box while trembling, he decides he must get revenge for his arm, so he activates the waves of erosion, which then blow up the mimic. Scared by this, Hidaka marvels at the power of the waves and celebrates his first win in life. Suddenly, the voice announces that he's just activated the goddess's divine protection and asks him to choose his spoils. Just then, Hidaka chooses the precious chest with infinite space and gets notified that he now has enough experience to level up. So, Hidaka splurged on the experience, leveling up all his abilities. Afterward, Hidaka checks out his status and marvels at how fast the numbers went up. When he wonders if that means he's gotten stronger, he remembers his classmates and figures they must be stronger than he is. Some moments later, he arrives at a giant door and tries to push it open, but fails. So he wonders if there's a password and decides to do it the Hulk way. On entering the room, Hidaka finds a staff just hovering and heads towards it, thinking it's like a fantasy game loot. To his surprise, he gets repelled by a force field that makes him wonder what it is. Suddenly, the building trembles as the roof breaks, and he gets terrified when a giant guardian drops. As if that's not enough, the guardian tries to give him the piñata treatment, but he escapes by some miracle. When it occurs to Hidaka that a direct hit could make him rest in peace, he notices that the guardian's sword is stuck. So he hits the guardian with the waves of erosion, which throws it off balance. Seeing this, Hidaka marvels at how easy it is to take down a guardian, but suddenly feels a blow that throws him into a wall. Confused, Hidaka wonders what happened and tries to heal his wounds. Afterwards, he realizes Hai's leveling up doesn't mean much, so he decides to take another shot at the guardian. This time, he activates the waves of erosion, and it makes the guardian explode. Suddenly, he gets notified that he's received a skill called the Mimic's Life, which enables him to fabricate things. So he checks his status and realizes his magic skill remains unchanged even after leveling up. He then flashes back to the lady's comment about him being weak, so he takes the staff, and he gets notified that he has received a magic tool known as the Wrath of Saints. At the Greyberg Academy, Ekigio pants in exhaustion as Philip, a lecturer, explains that his magic circle exploded because it was unstable. He then tells him to be more focused and adds that he must try to control his magic since its explosion is huge. Meanwhile, Siki watches from a distance and reiterates Philip's comment about their insufficient magical power. When Kia asks what he means, Siki further explains that their magic is a waste since they lack enough power. In addition, he states that it's ridiculous that Ekigio gets to be called hero since he's the only person who can use magic. However, Kita tells him that they can't change their state. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Hidaka drinks from a bottle and realizes how good it feels to get high. Not long after this, he walks into a pantry and realizes he doesn't need to worry about food anymore, but then he spots a door and opens it. On entering the room, he is welcomed by Sheion, the king of snakes, who then calls him an adventurer. Curious, Hidaka wonders where he is since it's different from other places he's seen. So Sheion asks Zuri, his one-eyed pet, how long it's been since they last saw an adventurer. Zuri then responds, saying it's been 150 years. Surprised he's been dormant for that long, Sheion arises and announces that they'll be having a party. While introducing himself as the king of snakes, he draws his sword for a fight. But before he finishes speaking, Sheion stabs Hidaka. Shocked by this, Hidaka wonders how that happened, while Sheion pulls out the sword and comments on how disappointed he is after waiting so long for some action. While he walks off chirping about how the quality of adventurers has decreased, Hidaka heals himself. So Sheion asks if he's a priest since he seems too slow to see his movements, but Zuri reveals that Hidaka is a healer. Surprised, Sheion asks how a healer found his way to his den, so Zuri explains that Hidaka is weird. Just as it was about to reveal Hidaka's skills, Hidaka picked up his staff and shot a beam of holy light at it. Suddenly, the beam blasts through Zuri, and it explodes while Sheion watches. Annoyed, Sheion tries to avenge Zuri, but Hidaka activates the waves of erosion and wonders if he hit him. To his surprise, Sheion exclaims, asking if he just used magic on him and laments about his broken sword. When Hidaka tells him to quit weeping over a sword, he gets slashed by the same sword. Alarmed, Hidaka checks out the wound while Sheion tells him he won't get out alive. So, Hidaka heals himself and marvels at Sheion's speed. After this, Sheion asks Hidaka who he is, and he responds by saying he's a healer just like Zuri says. Hearing this, Sheion slashes Hidaka again and promises to keep it up till he reveals the truth. When Hidaka insists he's a healer, Sheion keeps slashing him and accuses him of ending Zuri to keep it from revealing his secret. When he adds that healers don't use offensive magic, Hidaka reiterates that he's a healer. So Sheion points out that he's not even mentioning his name but clinging to his occupation. Hearing this, Hidaka flashes back to Siki's comment about a healer being better than a NEET, so he introduces himself as a NEET. While he imagines his moment of revenge, Sheion says he's bored and slashes Hidaka all over. However, Hidaka decides he's not going out without a fight, so as Sheion tries to end him, he unleashes his waves of erosion again, and this time he lands a fatal hit on Shaon. Surprised that Hidaka could still use magic, Shaon insinuates that he's become weaker after all those years, but Hidaka reminds him that he's the one who got slashed. After this, Shaon advises Hidaka to hide his identity from that moment forward, since anyone who knows his abilities would desire it. While he bleeds out, Shaon adds that healers are supposed to be weak and chip in that their world rejects idiots. Hearing this, Hidaka asks if he's ever heard about the god of revenge, so Shaon gets a flash of memory and smiles knowingly. He then reveals that the name gives him nostalgia and explains that it's a code name for an adventurer who had a curse. After this, Shaon tells Hidaka to travel to other lands to understand what it means and asks Hidaka what his real name is. In response, Hidaka tells Shaon his name and asks why he's acting differently, but then he gets notified to choose his spoils. Suddenly, Shaon's sword hovers midair, so Hidaka picks it up and wonders if a healer like him could wield the serpent's sword. As a reward for ending Zuri, he acquires its magic eye of truth, which enables him to peek at the enemy's status and shoot dark beams. While he leaves, he realizes he also acquired Shaon's flash skill, which gives him his speed, and wonders why his body didn't disappear. He then heads towards a set of stairs, hoping they lead outside. On his way, Hidaka drops the empty bottle of alcohol and thinks of how he's been getting high and sobering up with magic. So he heads up the stairs, wondering where the stairs lead, and suddenly hears a voice. But when he turns, he wonders if he imagined it, so he continues and finally finds himself in a forest. Surprised by the sudden change of scenery, Hidaka wonders if he'd been teleported. When he is sure he didn't do anything, he celebrates his freedom from the exile he was sentenced to. However, when he decides to begin his adventure in another world, he hears a voice again, and this time when he turns to check, he finds two guys and a lady bickering, so he wonders if they're humans while they also wonder who he is. Just then, Sieg says that there's a chance he heard their conversation and approaches Hidaka with a sword while saying they should finish him off, but Hidaka frantically begs him to relax. Ignoring this, Sieg attacks Hidaka, but he evades the attacks and suddenly takes Eliza hostage. Shocked at Hidaka's speed, Sieg asks how he pulled that off, but Hidaka begs him not to move. Meanwhile, Sieg is still poised for a fight, so Hidaka tells him to drop his sword. With Hidaka's sword to her throat, Eliza tells Sieg that they lost, since Hidaka moved so fast she couldn't see him coming. At this point, Sieg gives up and drops his sword. Hidaka then asks if it's a trap, but Sieg promises not to fight him, so Hidaka lets Eliza go and sheaths his sword. As he bids them farewell to continue his journey, Sieg stops him, but Hidaka asks what he wants since they wanted to end him minutes ago. Afterward, Sieg tells Hidaka that he needs his help and invites him to come with them. Just then, Eliza asks if he's really inviting a stranger to go with them, making Hidaka wonder what they are up to. So he tells them to get someone else and turns to leave, but he suddenly gets surrounded by fireballs, which then fall around him. Alarmed, Hidaka asks if he's gone crazy, but Sieg raises his hand and calls forth a flame hammer. Afterwards, Sieg adds that he just wants to test Hidaka's power, so Hidaka asks about his class, but Sieg refuses to tell him. Just then, Hidaka activates his Demon Eye of Truth and realizes that Sieg is a level 48 Dragon Knight with some abilities. After looking through his stats, Hidaka comments on Sieg's easy use of magic, but Sieg refuses to be fooled and prepares to attack. Back when Hidaka climbed the stairs out of Exile, he had applied his mischievous reversal to his spells and discovered soul break magic. He then wonders about the range of effects of the magic and decides to try it out in battle. So while he anticipates the drop of Saig's flame hammer, he realizes it's the perfect time to test the soul break. Suddenly, Hidaka raises his hand and launches the soul break, which then shuts down Saig's flame hammer. Shocked, Saig figures Hidaka is a monster while Hidaka stretches his hands at him and tries to retaliate. Just then, Eliza gets between them and apologizes on Saig's behalf. Seeing this, Hidaka thinks about Siki and laughs, but when he sees the fear on Sieg and his friends' faces, he decides he won't be like Siki. When he turns to leave, Saig asks Hidaka if he'd like to be their comrade, since he can tell that he's not an ordinary person. Seeing the question all over his face, Saig explains that they belong to a certain organization that is in need of someone strong. Curious, Hidaka asks what's in it for him, and Sage says they could give him anything he wants. In response, Hidaka says they can't give him what he wants, so Sage offers him a ring and tells him that he could communicate with them through it if he eventually decides. Afterward, Sage explains that their Dragon Heart organization aims to eradicate corruption and make the world at peace. Hearing this, Hidaka asks if they mistook him for one of the bad guys, but Sage explains that a duke's house nearby was raided and no one was left alive. So, Hidaka decides to take the ring for the time being and stores it in his dimensional storage. Afterwards, he asks Sage what he and his comrades plan to do, and they reveal that they're headed to Grey Belka since they heard they summoned some heroes about a month ago. Meanwhile, it's been only a few days since Hidaka got teleported, so Sage asks Hidaka about his plans, and he reveals that he's heading to town. Eliza then says he'll arrive in Rajosin in 3 days. Moments later, Sage asks Hidaka for his name, and since they're headed to Grey Belka, he decides to give them a different name. So he introduces himself as Nito. After they parted ways, Hidaka felt bored from walking for too long, and just then, he heard a rustle in the bushes. Suddenly, a pack of wolves approached him growling. Despite this, Hidaka gets excited and decides to have some fun with them. So he checks their status and realizes they're level 8 monsters and decides to end them for the loot. Out of nowhere, Sierra, a white knight, runs past him and tells him to get down while she quickly attacks the wolves. She then asks if he's all right, but Hidaka dryly says he is. He then thanks Sierra for saving him, and on checking her stats, he discovers she's a level 32 Knight of the White King. Looking closer, Sierra points out that he didn't seem too happy that she saved him, but they get interrupted by William, a merchant who then shows up in a carriage to introduce himself and his escort, Keith. Shortly after, on the ride, William explains that he offered to give Sierra a ride in exchange for her services as a guard. Hearing this, Hidaka apologizes for troubling the merchant, but William says he can never have enough guards when traveling and narrates how Sierra jumped off the carriage after feeling a presence. When he goes on about how impressed he is to see one of the famous White King's knights in action, Sierra says it's not a big deal. Curious, Hidaka asks about the White King's knights, so William explains that Arnold, the king of Rajosin, has a unit of knights directly under him, and because he rarely appears in public, William says it's a miracle to find one of his knights in the forest. Meanwhile, Hidaka figures he didn't think he'd meet a silver-haired girl who was like the heroine of the world. Just then, Sierra points out that William is famous among merchants for dealing with rare and valuable items. Afterwards, Williams asks Hidaka what he was doing in the forest, and he explains that he was on an adventure. On hearing this, Williams asks if he's about to go to the guild, surprising Hidaka, who suddenly realizes that a guild exists in the world. So he plays along by saying he's headed there, and Sierra offers to guide him when they arrive. She then asks Hidaka about his class, and he suddenly flashes back to Shaeon's warning. While he zones out, thinking of what to tell her, Sierra calls him back, and he reveals that he's a healer. Hearing this, William asks if he's going to join someone's party, and Hidaka says he would if he finds one. Sierra then offers to ask around at the guild since the healers are not adventurer material. When she adds that it might be hard, but he'll find someone to party with, Hidaka promises to do his best. As they continue on the ride, Sierra suggests that he learns swordsmanship since he can't use offensive magic. However, Hidaka says he can use a sword and asks if he can use a fireball or lightning strike. In response, Sierra says that it's above his pay grade and explains that the offensive magic of sorcerers is different from the supporting magic of the healers. On hearing this, Hidaka reveals that he learned an attribute enhancement spell, but Sierra explains that the attribute enhancement is a support magic that can only be applied to weapons. While she geeks out on the topic, Hidaka realizes he's got fluff for brains, so he decides to learn swordsmanship instead. Shortly after, they arrive in Tanya's village, where William suggests they take a break. Just then, they spot a crown and wonder what they're doing. So they ask some of the men, who then wonder who they are. After explaining that they're just passing through, the village chief explains that they're not in a welcoming mood since their wives got carted away by some thieves. While the village men talk about getting their wives back, Sierra chips in that thieves have connections to slave dealers and suggests that she and her friends go after them instead. The chief then points out that they're guests, but William tells him to let them handle it and tells Sierra to take Keith along with her. After this, when Sierra asks if anyone knows where the thieves might have gone, Jack says he followed the thieves after the attack and found the camp where the women were locked in cages. Just then, the village chief reveals that Jack's mother is all he's got, so Jack offers to take Sierra there. A few moments later, they arrive at the camp, so Sierra tells Jack to head back since things might get nasty real quick. Meanwhile, Hidaka checks out the camp and feels like he's in a game. Sierra then says that she and Keith will take care of the guards while he stands by to provide support. Hidaka watches them leave and figures he has to lie low since Sierra is already suspicious of him. While William and the village chief hope the rescue mission is going well, Sierra takes out the guards and breaks out the caged women. She then announces that they're heading back to the village and instructs the women to follow quietly. When she tells Hidaka that it's a good thing most of the thieves were away, despite feeling useless, Hidaka thinks it was too easy. As they turn to leave, Joe, the leader of the thieves, shows up with reinforcements and asks where they're headed. Unsurprised, Sierra says she knew it couldn't be that easy, and Joe insinuates that he can't let his goods be taken away just like that. While Hidaka figures it was a trap all along, Sierra identifies Joe by his name and further explains that he was formerly a knight and a captain of one of the punitive forces. However, 2 years before then, he suddenly slaughtered his men and set the city on fire before disappearing. Hearing this, Joe thanks her for the introduction and announces that he's now in the thieving business. Sierra asks him why a person of his caliber would do that, and he reveals that he hates the idea of being used by the king. Sierra then debunks this by saying the current king is generous, but Joe responds by saying she's got the same eyes as the people he offed. After this, he adds that she'd fetch a good price and orders his minions to slay the guys. Suddenly, Sierra tells Hidaka to run away with everyone while she activates her ice wind storm magic, which exterminates the thieves. Impressed, Joe comments that she's a knight of the White King, even though she looks too young to be one. Suddenly, a fatso charges towards Sierra with an axe, but Keith blocks it with his arm and blasts a hole through the idiot, leaving Hidaka shocked by the amazing abilities of offensive class sages. Meanwhile, Joe scoffs when he sees his men get thrashed by Sierra and Keith. Just when Sierra pierces through the last man, she hears someone scream for help, and on checking it out, she spots Jack's mother calling for him. Joe had grabbed him, surprising Sierra, who then wondered how that happened. So, Joe blames her for leaving him to return all by himself and says it's a stupid thing to do. Annoyed, Sierra asks Joe to release Jack, but he screams at the boy instead, telling him to shut up. After this, Joe reaches into his back pocket and takes out a knife while threatening to off the boy. Seeing this, Sierra figures she won't be fast enough to save Jack while Hidaka suddenly appears behind Joe with a knife. Within milliseconds, he stabs Joe in the throat and leaves him to choke on his blood. When Joe hits the floor, Sierra watches in horror while Jack asks Hidaka how he got there. Just then, Hidaka glances at the ladies and realizes he just blew his cover. So when he suggests they head back since everyone must be worried, Keith obliges, while Sierra grabs his shoulder and tells him to explain what just happened. After throwing a dozen questions at Hidaka, Sierra says he's hiding something and tells him to show her his status. However, Hidaka suggests they head to the village, so Sierra says he owes her some explanation when they get back. After this, Hidaka compliments Keith's magic, but gets met with a weird gaze. Keith then smirks and says his magic is nothing compared to Hidaka's while Jack reunites with his mother. Seeing this, Hikata wonders if he should have kept his strength hidden like Shaon advised, but decides it was for the best. Upon arriving at the village, the women reunite with their families as Hidaka quietly observes. He notices a hooded girl standing alone and approaches her, asking why she isn't with her family. When she keeps mute, a nearby woman explains that the girl had already been in the cage when they were kidnapped and hasn't spoken, even when others tried talking to her. Just then, Sierra appears and offers to take care of the girl, promising to help her return to her hometown. However, the girl ignores Sierra and tugs on Hidaka's cloak. Annoyed, Sierra declares she's leaving. Afterward, Hidaka tells the girl she made him look like the bad guy, to which the girl replies that she simply doesn't like Sierra. Surprised to hear her speak, Hidaka asks why she's been silent all this time. Suddenly, the girl pulls back her hood and introduces herself as Totrika. However, Hidaka is too awestruck by her looks to hear her, so she asks if he's listening, adding that he can call her Toa. In response, Hidaka tells her his real name since he finds her too dashing to be lied to. However, he tells her to call him Nito in front of the others. Moments later, Hidaka asks Toa a few questions about her home and how she got caught, but Toa says she has no idea. Somewhere else, William asks Keith about Sierra's swordsmanship. So Keith reveals that she's amazing with the sword and he'd be no match for her. When he adds that the problem is about Hidaka, William misunderstands and points out that Hidaka will have a tough time becoming an adventurer with his class. However, Keith disagrees and states that he is a monster. Hearing this, William says it must be interesting for Keith to have said that much about him. The next day, Sierra glares menacingly at Hidaka while Toa naps on his shoulder. A few moments later, they depart from Tanya village, and on their way to Rajosin, Sierra points out that Hidaka has yet to explain how he beat Joe despite being a healer. When he doesn't respond, Sierra asks if he's really a healer, and to convince her, Hidaka fabricates a fake status, which only shows that he's a level 3 healer with Godspeed. On seeing this, Sierra believes the lie, and in addition, Hidaka explains that he took out Joe using the Godspeed. Afterward, Sierra apologizes for doubting him while Hidaka smiles, grateful to have earned the mimic's life skill. Shortly after, they arrive at Rajosin, and on entering the city, William announces that it's time for them to part ways, so Hidaka bows to thank him for the ride. After William's departure, Sierra suggests they head to the guild, and when they arrive, they find many adventurers chattering and drinking. Sierra then calls Hidaka to join her at the counter, where the attendant states that he'll be checking Hidaka's status. When he is asked to put his hand on the device, Hidaka worries he might be found out, so he hopes that the mimic's life works on the device. After this, his status shows that he's a healer, so his registration was complete. Sierra then asks him about his plans afterward, so Hidaka asks Toa if she wants to visit the town hall to find clues about her hometown, but Toa says they could do that later. Surprised, Hidaka then asks if she wants to register as an adventurer, and she obliges. Suddenly, Hidaka feels an arm around his neck, and the drunk dude says that he envies Hidaka for having 2 girls with him. When he asks Hidaka to share with him and his drunk buddies, Hidaka says that the ladies are his friends. So the drunk dude commands him to leave his friends behind since he's just a healer. After drawing everyone's attention, the drunk guy says that he and his C-grade adventurers will take care of the ladies, but Sierra points out that he's being rude. Facing Sierra, the drunk asks her to stop hanging with a lame guy and hang out with him instead. At the same time, some other knights barge in, calling for Sierra and bowing before her while expressing their gladness on her return. After this, the knight asks who her companions are, and Sierra introduces Hidaka and Toa. When the knights ask if they should head back to the castle, the drunk dude grabs Sierra by her clothes and says that she's got some guts, ignoring him. Immediately, Sierra introduces his head to the floor while talking some sense into him. Meanwhile, Hidaka watches, thinking the C-grade is too weak. Later, Sierra announces that it's time for them to part ways and gives them her address in case they run into any problems. After Sierra leaves, Hidaka wonders what to do next and realizes he's got no money. Sharon, a store owner, then calls out to him and states that he's rocking a really strange drip. Moments later, they end up in her shop, where she asks if they're really traveling without any money. After this, she offers to trade Hidaka's clothes for new ones for both of them. In response, Hidaka states that his clothes are worn out, but she insists that the clothes are made from high-quality fabrics and it'd be a waste if he discards them. So Hidaka checks out his uniform and decides to take the offer. Afterward, the lady asks Hidaka about his class, and he reveals that he's a healer, surprising the woman, who then brings out a complete set of outfits, including a pouch for keeping herbs. Surprised, Hidaka asks if healers need herbs, and the woman explains that healers need to take along many healing items since their magic is weak. When the lady asks about Toa's class, Hidaka realizes he hasn't seen her status, so Toa reveals that she's a paladin. On checking her status, Hidaka wonders what a paladin is, so Sharon explains that they're magic knights who are proficient at both magic and swordsmanship. After this, Sharon points out that Toa is from the demon race, leaving Hidaka confused. Sensing this, the woman asks if he's really got nothing upstairs, and she explains that the demon race is born with high magical powers. A few moments later, Sharon is surprised to see Hidaka and Toa in their new outfits, so she compliments their looks and says that she has added an extra broad sword for Toa. Hidaka then thanks her, while Toa checks out the sword. As if that's not enough, Sharon hands them a bag of coins, saying it's not all worth as much as Hidaka's clothes. Since Hidaka is as clueless as ever, she tells him that Toa is a walking target because of her high magical power and advises him to protect her. Just then, he peeks at Toa, wondering why discrimination exists in every world. As they leave, Sharon introduces herself and tells them to come by again if they need anything. Later, while they get some drinks, Hidaka glances at Toa and thinks about how other people's levels are inferior to hers. Just then, he asks Toa if she can see his status. In response, Toa says she can, so Hidaka asks her what she thinks about it, and she states that she can only tell that he's abnormal. Hearing this, Hidaka figures he looks abnormal even to a demon, so he asks Toa how she got caught by thieves when she's so strong. Toa then says she was scared, so Hidaka asks about her location when she was kidnapped. When Toa says she is in a castle, Hidaka's eyes spin, and he thinks she must be from a rich family. After this, Toa explains that she trains in the mornings and waits for her family to return home at night. Hearing this, Hidaka realizes Toa has been restricted in a castle all her life, so she gets scared. Just then, he figures they're similar in a number of ways. Sometime later, Hidaka knocks out the last standing goblin with a punch to the face and announces that they've got enough to pay for an inn. While they pick the goblin's teeth, Hidaka asks why they don't vanish after dying, and Toa explains that corpses only vanish in dungeons. Afterwards, they arrive at the guild, and at the counter they get paid. Just then, Toa yawns and suggests they find an inn to rest. Hearing this, the guild attendant shows them an inn with a vacancy on a map. Just then, a guy approaches Toa and asks for her name, but Hidaka says she's with him. With a look of disdain, the guy says he has never seen Hidaka and asks if he's an adventurer. When Hidaka says it's his first day on the job, the guys call him a newbie and mock him by saying he started off by hunting goblins. Ignoring this, Hidaka says that it's tough being an adventurer. He then tells Hidaka to excuse them and tells Toa that low-rank missions won't earn her enough money. Just then, Hidaka chips in that he doesn't need to worry about them, but the guy shuts him up and offers to take Toa on a trip to the Maldives if she goes with him. To convince her, the guy states that since Hidaka is a healer, he's probably going to stay at a cheap inn. So he holds Toa by her shoulder and asks her to leave with him while promising to satisfy her better than Hidaka ever could. Hidaka then decides it isn't worth being bothered about, so he tells Toa that they should leave. Suddenly, she calls down lightning on the guy and fries his brain. While everyone watches, Hidaka approaches Toa and she grabs his hand to drag him out. Later, Hidaka walks after Toa and tells her to stop for a second. When she does, she asks him why he lets the idiot talk down to him without talking back. In response, Hidaka says he ignored the guy to avoid making a scene since it's the better option. Hearing this, Toa angrily says he doesn't need to think about that and asks if he's not vexed after the guy made fun of him. Just then, Hidaka watches Toa cry for his sake, even though they don't know each other that much, so he apologizes and thanks her for getting angry for his sake. He then explains that he prefers to settle it without making a scene since healers aren't supposed to be strong. However, Toa says she'll get angry for Hidaka's sake, making Hidaka wonder if she heard him. After this, Hikata thinks about the connections he's made in the new world and figures he'll have a life waiting for him after he gets his revenge. Not long after this, while they ate, Hidaka asked Toa if she eats delicious meals often, but she said she doesn't. Curious, he then asks about what she eats in the castle, and Toa reveals that she ate what was prepared for her. At this point, Hidaka realizes he's gotten more curious about her, so he decides to check the land for her house. When Toa points out that the meat will definitely make her stronger than what she ate before, Hidaka says he's glad she likes it. Afterwards, Toa suggests they take another quest the next day, and Hidaka agrees with her. After soaking in the bath for a while, Toa shows up in the room, and Hidaka comments that they're lucky to get a room at a popular inn. He then offers to sleep on the floor, but Toa suggests he sleep on the other side of the bed since he'll catch a cold on the floor. Hidaka then says he tosses around in bed a lot, but Toa says she trusts him, surprising Hidaka. So he asks what she means by that, but Toa avoids the question and asks if he's not going to sleep, so Hidaka gets in bed with her. Some moments later, while Hidaka tries to keep his thoughts PG and his little man at ease, Toa asks if he's asleep. When Hidaka says he's not, she reveals that she was always alone in the castle since her parents only returned at night. Just then, she touches Hidaka's back and says she doesn't feel lonely because she's with him. The next day, Sierra shows up at the inn, and Hidaka asks why she showed up so early in the morning, but Sierra corrects him and says it's almost noon. When she says she's thinking of teaching him swordsmanship, Toa shows up, calling Hidaka his real name and asks what's going on. Just as Hikata tries to explain what is up, he freaks out on spotting Toa in her underwear. Seeing this, Sierra gets furious and chaos follows. Some moments later, while they eat together, Sierra apologizes for jumping to conclusions while Hikata tells Toa that Sierra's attack didn't hurt. Ignoring this, Sierra says she heard Toa call Hikata a different name, but since the duo refuses to speak, she figures Nito must be an alias. So Hidaka begs Sierra to always call him Nito in public places, and Sierra says she understands. She then points out that she's not used to hearing his name and asks if it's his Jikoku name. However, since Hidaka has no idea what that means, Sierra explains that there are people with similar names in a country across the sea. Hearing this, Hidaka decides to look into that too. Some minutes later, Sierra asks if Hidaka has any plans for the day, and in response, he says he was thinking of taking up a quest from the guild since he needs money. Sierra then asks if she could tag along since they can get a high-reward quest by taking her along, so Hidaka agrees. On arriving at the guild, Sierra explains that the grading system of adventurers ranges from F to S. After this, she adds that Hidaka and Toa can only take up E-grade quests and adds that with her on their team, they can take on higher quests. Hidaka then asks Sierra if she's an adventurer, and she responds by saying she used to take requests from the guild before serving the country. Concerned, Hidaka points out that the White King's knights aren't supposed to be seen in public, but Sierra assures him that not many know their identities. Not long after, they check out the quests and brainstorm on which to pick. Despite being unable to read the writings of the world, Hidaka checks out the quest requests and points at a diagram while asking what it is. In response, Sierra explains that it's a Kelane, a huge beast which lives in the forest, so Hidaka detaches it and suggests they take the quest. Just then, Sierra suggests they check out a store across the street after processing the request with the receptionist. Afterward, they visit Sharon's store. Sierra tells Sharon that she's thinking of stocking up on Catherine's medicine since they're going on a Kelane hunt. Hikata then asks what Catherine's medicine is, and Sierra explains that it's a medicine that protects the ears from the paralytic effect of a Kelane's voice. Just then, Sharon identifies Hidaka and Toa by their statuses, surprising Sierra to hear that Toa is a paladin. After they leave, Sierra won't stop talking about Toa's status, so Hikata asks why she keeps talking about it. In response, Toa says that paladins are extremely rare, even within the White King's knights. Hearing this, Hikata asks if she thinks it's okay to blurt out that kind of information, but Sierra says it's fine, making Hikata regret his decision to reveal his real name. Shortly after this, they find some wounded adventurers and ask what happened. So one of them narrates that they went to the forest looking for orcs, but suddenly found the goblins and orcs fleeing for their lives. However, they didn't turn back, so they encountered a Kelane that looked strange. After this, the adventurer adds that he knows what Kelanes look like, but this one looks abnormal. Hearing this, Sierra asks if Kelane was covered in grains of light, and the adventurer confirms this. Suddenly, they hear a loud roar from the bushes, and while they watch, the Kelane walks out. So, Sierra tells the adventurers to escape while they handle it. When the Kelane roars again, Hidaka smiles and says it's a Kelane, but Sierra corrects him by saying it's a newt Kelane. She then pops open one of the medicines and explains that monsters also exist in grades, so a newt Kelane is a grade A monster. After this, she adds that hunting a newt Kelane is a dangerous request, so she asks Hidaka and Toa if they are okay since she has been hit by the Kelane's voice and has lost her mana circulation. Just then, Sierra says she's only seen Hidaka's ability once and asks if she can rely on him if things go south. Hearing this, Hidaka checks the beast's status and realizes it's a level 32 beast, so he suggests they leave it to him. Facing Toa, Hidaka says he's counting on her to support Sierra, but Sierra draws her sword and suddenly charges towards Kelain. After her first few strikes, Sierra realizes that the Kelain's tough hide is immune to her attacks, so she evades the beast's attacks, while Toa summons lightning on the Kelain. Shocked, she points out that magic has no effect on the Kelain. Sierra then says that Newt Kelain's controls magic particles with their antlers, so Hidaka suggests they get rid of the antlers first. Just then, the Kelain prepares to attack, but Hidaka tells Sierra to look out, so the Kelain shoots a destructive beam of light at her, but luckily for her, she evades it. In retaliation, Toa doubles her magic circle and attacks the Kelain with lightning again, but to her surprise, there is no damage done. So Hidaka figures it's not a matter of brute force and decides that his soul break magic would be effective in this case. Suddenly, he dashes to the top of the Kelain and lands on its head while activating his soul break magic, which stuns the beast. He then grabs its antlers and crushes them, making the Kelain roar in agony. Within seconds, Hidaka was back on the ground, making Sierra wonder what he had just done. Hikata then explains that since the antlers are broken, the Kelain has lost its defenses. After this, Hidaka says he'd like to try out something on the Kelain and asks the ladies to let him handle it. As he approaches the beast, he tells the ladies to keep everything they say secret. Meanwhile, in the city, a knight informs Reinhardt, the leader of the White King's knights, that a Kelain surrounded by light particles was spotted in the forest. Hearing this, Reinhardt asks about the informant, and the knights reveal that they're some wounded adventurers. In addition to this, the knight reveals that there are still 3 adventurers fighting the Kelain. After he describes that a woman matching Sierra's description was among the 3, Reinhardt orders the knight to inform Raid and Hilda that Sierra is battling a Newt Kelain. 2 days ago, when the Tanya villagers had gone to sleep, Hidaka checked the skills he had taken from Joe and discovered he was a fire magic user. But since he couldn't use elemental magic, it was of no use. He then finds a message, and on checking it out, he realizes that Joe became a knight just to bag himself a wife. And one day, on returning from battle, he finds out she was lynched to death for stealing, so he falls into despair. While reading the letter, Hidaka gets notified that he has acquired a magic called Hellfire, so he checks it out and realizes it's a fire born out of Joe's grudge to burn the target. But since it's unusable like other elemental magic, Hidaka says he hates healers. Just then, he got an idea and wondered if he'd be able to use the magic by revering it. So he activates his mischievous reversal and flips the Hellfire magic into goddess tears. So in the fight against the Kelain, Hidaka decides to try it out and feels weird. Suddenly, the sky cracks open and a goddess peeks out of the crack, directly above the Newt Kelain. After this, the goddess tears up, and the moment her bloody tears land on the Kelain, it burns a hole through it. Suddenly, the goddess makes it rain on the Newt Kelain while Sierra and the others watch in horror. When the Kelain is reduced to blood and ashes, the rain stops and Toa asks if it's over. Hidaka then says it is, because he felt like himself again, but suddenly they hear some horses approaching. So Hidaka points out that someone is coming and announces that he doesn't want to be discovered. So he tells Sierra that he showed her his abilities because he trusts her and suggests that they meet again in the capital. After Hidaka and Toa leave, Sierra wonders who he is. While the horse riders try to locate the Newt Kelain, Raid says it's been a while since he had a decent fight and threatens to slice up the beast. Suddenly, they spot a clearing in the forest, and on checking it out, they find the remains of the Kelain. While they try to figure out what happened, Reinhardt asks Sierra if she took out the Kelain, but she stares blankly at them. Reinhardt then points out that, according to the intel they got, there were supposed to be 2 adventurers with her, but Sierra says they're no longer there. Curious, Reinhardt asks what she means and points out that it'd take 4 white knights to defeat a Kelain. However, since Sierra keeps mute, Raid assumes they were eaten by Kelain and laughs at Sierra's traumatized condition. However, Hilda tells him to shut up, but the maniac keeps on laughing. Later at the knight's office, Reinhardt reports to Arnold, king of Rajosen, that Sierra might have defeated the Newt Kelain, but adds that he's uncertain, judging from her unstable condition. When Reinhardt leaves, he meets Daniel, another white knight at the door, who then questions him about the investigations, but since Reinhardt has no answers, he states that he's also in the dark. He then tells Daniel to ask Sierra since she was on the scene, and adds that he could meet the autopsy team for answers. However, Daniel gives Reinhardt a knowing look and says something must be fishy. Hearing this, Reinhardt explains that the other adventurers were not on the scene when they arrived. However, he states that the monster's corpse was so damaged and covered in blood. Daniel then chips in that the missing adventurers must have the answers. In addition to this, Reinhardt states that Sierra knows what happened but isn't speaking for some reason, so he asks Daniel if he can interrogate her. But Daniel ignores this and points out that the missing adventurers must be as strong as they are if they could end a Newt Kellyan. In response, Reinhardt says that they might be stronger, but Daniel says that's impossible. Just then, Reinhardt says that Sierra will face the consequences if the said adventurers cause any trouble for the country, and adds that he needs to know if they're allies or enemies. Somewhere in the city, Toa comments on Hidaka's mischievous reversal and states that a healer shouldn't be able to use it. Hidaka then says it's better if he seals his magic since he's strong enough to break Kellyn's antlers. So, Toa says she'll do her best to protect him if he doesn't want to use his powers. After this, Hidaka asks Toa why she trusted him when they first met, but before she responds, Sierra shows up and asks if she's interrupting something. When Hidaka apologizes for making her come all the way to the city, Sierra says it's better if she doesn't attract any attention and adds that she didn't say anything about them. Suddenly, Raid shows up, surprising Sierra, who then asks how he got there. However, Raid says they might have a power strong enough to turn the Kellyn into minced meat, but it's nothing like his. So he summons his scythe and asks the trio to reveal who took his prey. After this, Raid narrates that the White Knights rode out immediately after the injured adventurers reported about the Kellyn. But on getting there, the Newt Kellyn had been turned into minced meat and was covered in blood. He then reveals that a Newt Kellyn can only be offed by physical attacks and states that the Newt Kellyn was slain by magic. In addition to this, Raid points out that a Newt Kellyn's horn is too hard to break, so he concludes it's weird that a sacred monster would be slain like an ordinary one. When Raid says he can't overlook it, Hidaka asks him if he followed Sierra because he doubted her. Suddenly, Sierra chips in that Hidaka and Toa are not enemies, but Raid says it's not up to her to decide and leaps to attack. However, Reinhardt senses this back at the Knight's office and realizes it's Raid's magic power. Just then, he figures something's happening. Back in the city, Toa parries Raid's attack, surprising Raid enough to ask for her name. When Toa tells him, she adds that she exterminated the Newt Kellyn. However, Raid gives her a dry look and insinuates that it couldn't have been a woman. But since he couldn't sense any magic from Hidaka, Raid attacked Toa because he could sense hers. After Toa dodges and blocks his attacks, Hidaka rushes to help her, but Toa tells him to stand back. Immediately, Raid continues attacking and the fight goes on. On realizing that Toa is not going down easily, Raid activates his fire armor magic and says he'll be using his card first. While Toa marvels at this, Raid charges at her with his flaming scythe and attacks her. Toa then blocks the attacks but gets burned by the flames. Concerned, Hidaka calls out to Toa, but she insists she's okay while Raid points out that her blunt sword can't block his attacks. He then tries to get her to use her magic, but Toa pretends to be at her full capacity. Suddenly, Raid hits her and tries to take her head, but Reinhardt suddenly shows up in between them to stop the fight. Annoyed, Raid asks Reinhardt why he interfered, but Reinhardt says that's his line. He then asks Raid what he thinks he's doing while Hidaka heals Toa and claims she won't have any scars. Afterwards, Hidaka asks Toa why she didn't use her magic, and she explains that it would destroy everything around her. Meanwhile, Raid informs Reinhardt that Toa slew the Newt Kellyn, but when Reinhardt says that it doesn't make her an enemy since she was just doing her job, Raid freaks out and points out that Toa fled the scene because she had something to hide. He then points out that Hidaka used healing magic and asks if he's a priest. However, Hidaka says he's a healer, so Raid laughs at him and says it's why he couldn't sense any magic from him. Hearing this, Reinhardt stares at Hidaka and freaks out. So Raid tells Reinhardt to stand and watch quietly if he won't help. Suddenly, he picks up his scythe and decides to end the Toa for the country. However, Hidaka gets in between them. At that moment, Reinhardt tries to warn Raid, but it is too late as he dashes towards Hidaka and a massive explosion goes off. Surprised, Reinhardt wonders what happened, but when the dust blows over, he spots Hidaka standing while Raid lies unconscious in rubble. Suddenly, he realizes that Hidaka must have been the one who slew the Newt Kellyn, so he draws his sword unconsciously while Hidaka stares at him. Just then, Sierra begs Reinhardt while claiming that Hidaka is not an enemy. Surprised to see the ladies far away, Reinhardt wonders how Hidaka got them to a safe distance within seconds. After this, Sierra tells Reinhardt to lower his sword since Hidaka only did that to protect Toa. Just then, Reinhardt realizes he drew the sword on the spur of the moment. So when he sheathes it and apologizes, Hidaka asks if he knew from the start that he ended the killing, but Reinhardt explains that he got suspicious when Raid said he couldn't feel anything from Hidaka. In addition to this, Reinhardt explains that everyone has a magic power from birth which can be sensed, except when the power is far greater than that of the sensor. After stating that Hidaka's power is so great that even he couldn't sense it, Reinhardt apologizes on behalf of Raid and offers to take responsibility for his actions. However, Hidaka brushes it off by saying that he and Toa simply want to finish normal quests and live an ordinary life. On hearing this, Reinhardt promises to keep their secret and make sure they're paid for defeating the Newt Kelling. Afterward, Reinhardt says he has to report to the king, so he decides to report that they both helped Sierra to take down the beast, so Hidaka thanks him and announces that they're leaving. Reinhardt then picks up Raid's body and suggests they meet some other day. When he leaves, Hidaka thinks of how a single punch ruined everything. Later at the Knight's office, Daniel meets Reinhardt and reveals that the Newt Kelling is weird in some ways since, after they constructed it back, they realized the Kelling was hollow inside. Surprised, Reinhardt asks what he means, and Daniel reveals that the autopsy team discovered that it had no internal organs from the start. After this, Daniel speculates that someone must be pulling the strings behind the scenes. In addition, Daniel says he has never seen a sacred monster being manipulated and suggests they investigate the forest as soon as possible. So, Reinhardt gave him the authority to lead the investigation team. Shortly after, Sierra visits her family with Hidaka and Toa, making Hidaka wonder what she wants with broke people like them. A few moments later, while they sit at the table to be served, Hidaka points out that he never expected that Sierra was from a noble family, but Sierra protests, saying she's just a knight and nothing more. Just then, Braun, Sierra's dad, comments that he has heard a lot about Hidaka and has looked forward to meeting him. In addition to this, Maria, Sierra's mum, says she has heard of how he saved a boy in Tanya village and points out that Hidaka must be very strong. Upon hearing all these, he glances at Sierra and figures she's got a basket mouth, but she avoids his gaze. Just then, Hilda walks in, so Maria introduces Hidaka and Toa to her. Just then, Hilda introduces herself as Sierra's sister, making Hidaka stutter at the sight of her impressive racks. When Maria says she heard that Hidaka has been helping Sierra, he wonders how she knows about the Newt Kelling. He then figures she must have been on Reinhardt's crew, so he decides to ask her. But before he finishes, Hilda says she's also one of the White Knights. Hearing this, Hidaka figures every White King's Knight must know his secret already, so he points out that it's amazing that both siblings are White King's Knights. However, Hilda says it's not a big deal since the White Knight had seats available. When Hidaka points out that she must have been talented to have been chosen, Hilda explains that she and Sierra learned swordsmanship early and became White Knights when their abilities were recognized. In addition, Hilda states that unlike them, Reinhardt was chosen to join at the age of 12 since he is talented. After this, she chips in that Reinhardt might not be as talented as Hidaka, leaving Hidaka curious as to how much she knows. Suddenly, Sierra interferes and tells Hilda to stop staring at Hidaka like he's the last slice of pizza. When she reveals that Hilda doesn't let go of her prey once she sets her eyes on them, Hilda points out that Hidaka isn't his boyfriend. In response, Sierra says she's missing the point, so Hilda asks Hidaka how he feels about Sierra. Hearing this, Sierra freaks out and asks why they're talking about that. Suddenly, Toa slams a bottle on the table, so everyone looks at her. Just then, Hidaka realizes she's wasted, but Toa stands to say Hidaka is hers but didn't complete the sentence. So Hidaka asks Toa how many bottles she had drunk, while Hilda tells Sierra that she's got a rival. Suddenly, Toa collapses into Hidaka's arms and sleeps off. A few moments later, Hidaka lays her on a bed in one of the rooms. So Sierra points out that they both met Toa at the same time and asks Hidaka why she trusts him. Since he has no idea, Hidaka says he'll ask her later, and Sierra says she'd be interested to know too. Afterward, when Sierra shows Hidaka to his room, she asks if he's free the next day for some swordsmanship training, but Hidaka says that he was planning to visit the guild but changes his mind and begs Sierra to teach him the next day. When Sierra gets excited and leaves, Hilda suddenly sneaks up on Hidaka, making him shudder. So he asks her what she's doing, but she says she's just passing by. Just then, she asks if it's true that he defeated Raid, and when Hidaka confirms this, Hilda asks if he did it for Toa. While Hidaka stares blankly, Hilda reveals that she has heard his story and can tell that he and Toa are clearly into each other. However, when Hidaka tries to debunk this, Hilda asks if he could take Sierra on too, since it's her first time being interested in a man and can be dense when it comes to matters like that. After this, Hilda requests that Hidaka take Sierra with him whenever he leaves the country, since she's been swinging swords all her life. Hearing this, Hidaka says he doesn't mind, but adds that he doesn't know what Sierra would say about that. Hilda then says it'll be the best for Sierra in the long run and bids Hidaka good night. The next day, Hidaka wakes and finds Toa in bed with him, so he freaks out and asks why she's there. In response, Toa says she was alone when she woke up, and she then shows off her buns while asking if she's not allowed to do that. While Hidaka stutters, Sierra knocks on the door and says that he seems to be talking to someone. On entering the room, she finds Toa in bed with him and gets furious while Hidaka sweats profusely. Sierra then comments that she knows he needs to fulfill his desires, but Hidaka interrupts her and says she misunderstood what was going on. Later, Sierra tutors Hidaka on how to wield a sword while Toa watches. When Sierra points out that he's a fast learner, Hidaka thinks swordsmanship is difficult and wonders if he could learn it. Just then, he asks Sierra when she learned swordsmanship, and she reveals that she started with a wooden sword at age 3 and replaced it with a real one along the way. After this, Hidaka asks Toa about when she learned, and she says it was about the same age as Sierra. She then narrates that she started learning after she got attacked by a Leo wolf outside the castle and was saved by her father. Shocked, Sierra exclaims on hearing this, and Toa asks if she knows about Leo wolves. In response, Sierra says she has never seen one but reveals that it's a ferocious S-rank monster. Curious, Hidaka asks if being an S-rank means that Leo wolves are stronger than Kellings. So Sierra explains that it'll take all the knights and adventurers in a kingdom to fight a Leo wolf, while Hidaka hopes he meets one someday. Afterward, Hidaka asks if anyone in the country has fought an S-rank monster. Sierra then reveals that someone from the White Knight once did and suggests they ask Reinhardt. In addition to this, Sierra states that the guild has S-ranked missions, but since Rajausen is peaceful, it'll be a hunt in a land far away. While they discuss monster ranks, Hidaka asks how a level 500 mimic would be ranked, and Sierra explains that if such a monster exists, it would be unranked. To clarify her point, Sierra explains that above the ranking system of the guild is an infinite tier and states that the mimic might fall into that category. So Hidaka asks Sierra if she thinks level 500 monsters exist, and she says that if one existed, no one who meets them would live to tell the story, so they'll remain unidentified. Hearing this, Hidaka thinks about the box mimic and figures he should have asked Shaeon more questions since he seems to know a lot. Later, Hidaka finds himself in a weird place and wonders if it's a shrine. Since the last thing he remembers doing was sleeping in Sierra's house, he wonders if he's dead. Just then he hears someone say it's been a while, and on turning to look he finds Shaeon. Confused, Hidaka tries to ask questions, but Shaeon tells him to relax and follow him. Shortly after, they arrive somewhere, where they find some other guy who then welcomes Hidaka and reveals that he summoned him. When Hidaka asks who he is, the guy realizes he won't recognize him in his present state, so he transforms and speaks. On hearing the voice, Hidaka realizes it's the voice that told him to drink the elixir he found in the box. Just then, Shaeon decides to introduce his comrade, but the guy calls Shaeon, stating that he doesn't need to say anything more. So Shaeon says he's right and apologizes while Hidaka stares at them, confused. Just then, Hidaka says he doesn't know where he is and asks them to tell him something. However, Hidaka figures the guy might be the god of revenge, since he recalls Shaeon's reaction when he mentioned his comrade's name back then. So Hidaka asks about their location, and the god of revenge explains that it's not a place for him and a prison for them. In addition to this, the guy explains to Hidaka that his body is in a bed somewhere, and states that he only summoned his soul. When Hidaka asks what he means by that, the god of revenge reveals that the elixir he drank has an effect that can link him to whoever drinks it. Hidaka then asks him what the elixir is, and the god of revenge explains that it was made from his blood. Upon hearing this, Hidaka cringes while the god of revenge explains that the elixir gives a random infinite tier skill to whoever drinks it, and adds that Hidaka was lucky since he got a skill good enough to defeat Shaeon. Hidaka then asks why he was chosen, but the god of revenge says that it could have been anyone since he put the elixir in the chest for experimental purposes. Just then, Hidaka realizes that the mimic would have snacked on him if the god of revenge hadn't done that. After this, the god of revenge asks if he can move on to the main topic, so Hidaka tells him to get on with it since he needs to get back to bed. Just then, Sheo steps forward and announces that Hidaka will be receiving his swordsmanship. Hearing this, Hidaka says he has had enough training during the day and asks why he has to train again in his sleep. When he asks the god of revenge if that's why he was summoned, the god of revenge says he can't reveal that and adds that the transfer of Sheon's swordsmanship will be over in an instant. Facing Sheon, Hidaka asks why he's there since he's supposed to be dead, but Sheon also says he can't reveal that. So Hidaka wonders what's up with them, while the god of revenge says that he'll get his answers eventually. Just then, Sheon explains to Hidaka that he'll feel some pain during the transfer of the swordsmanship. When Hidaka says it's fine, Sheon touches his head, but since he doesn't feel anything, Hidaka asks Sheon what he's doing. Suddenly, Sheon offloads his swordsmanship into Hidaka's brain while he screams. After this, he realizes the pain is gone, so Sheon asks how he's feeling, and Hidaka says he has memories of different techniques. Afterward, Hidaka points out that there's a technique he has no name for, and Sheon explains that he managed to create a technique with no weak spot. He then tells Hidaka that he'll need it down the road. Moments later, the god of revenge tells Hidaka to go to Baomont and find a woman named Khalifa. The god of revenge then gives him some messages for the said woman while Hidaka wonders if he could remember them all. However, since he owes the god of revenge, Hidaka says he'll deliver the message. After this, the god of revenge suggests that Hidaka go to a magic school to learn magic, but Hidaka points out that he's just a healer. In response, the god of revenge says it's not a problem since magic is limitless. So when Hidaka decides to do it, Sheon suggests he give his serpent sword to Toa since it doesn't suit him. Surprised, Hidaka asks how they know about Toa and realizes they've been watching him all along. Suddenly, he feels his strength leave, and his vision gets blurry, so the god of revenge says that the time is up. As he slowly passes out, the god of revenge states that they can't summon him many times and begs him to find them. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, Fran walks into a room and meets Gaido, who then apologizes for making her come all the way. However, Fran grins and thanks him for the invitation. After this, Gaido introduces himself and his helper, Yun. After exchanging pleasantries, Fran takes a seat and asks why she was invited. In response, Gaido reveals that the spirit beast she sent has been made useless. Unsurprised, Fran asks how many knights were exterminated, but Gaido says none were offed, since an adventurer intercepted the beast and it was bloodied up before the knights arrived. Hearing this, Fran says it's unusual, so Gaido presents a sample of Kelane's corpse which he had Yun steal, and requests that Fran revive it with her magic. Just then, Fran takes out a jar and presents it to Gaido, who then checks it out and asks what it is. In response, she says it's a gift, and explains that she predicted his request the moment she received his invitation. Curious, Gaido asks about its contents, and Fran explains that it's an army of monsters. On hearing this, Gaido gets excited while Fran explains that the jar contains B-ranked monsters and above. She then chips in that she borrowed some resources from the laboratory when she left the Empire. So Fran asks when Gaido plans to make a move, and he says he will in a week. After Fran leaves, Yun says she doesn't think the jar would be of any use, but Gaido says it'll be their insurance in case Hidaka intervenes. The next day, while they are eating at a restaurant, Sierra points out that Hidaka looks pale and asks if he's okay. In response, Hidaka says that he feels the same as usual, but Sierra doubts this, so she points out that he only watched the swordsmanship practice that morning without holding a sword. She then asks if he dislikes the practice, but Hidaka says it's fun and adds that he can feel himself growing. After this, he tells her not to worry too much about it, but Hidaka couldn't stop thinking about what happened the previous night. During practice that morning, he had watched Sierra and Toa spar and suddenly saw their fight play out in slow motion. Because of this, he figures what happened the previous night wasn't just a dream, so if he were to wield a sword at practice, the ladies would ask questions. While he thinks of excuses to give so he can avoid practice, he spots a man dragging Nemu, a beast folk girl, along. He then calls the attention of the ladies and requests that they chase the man immediately, since he's most likely a slave merchant. Just then, the man drags Nemu into a room and throws her on the floor. Some other guy then points out that she's a beast folk and adds that she'll fetch a good price. Afterwards, Nemuas was put in a cage and told to stay there. After threatening to cut up her ears, the man leaves while the girl weeps for her family and everyone she knows. Moments later, some other men show up and check her out while saying she is better than the previous one they had. So one of them points out that the boss isn't around and suggests they take dips in her honey pot. Hearing this, Nemu's eyes widen while the men discuss how they'll ease their stress with her. After this, one of them tells Nemu to stay still till they're done and drags her while she protests. While they prepare to get to business, the first man suddenly gets attacked while the other gets hit in the face and crashes into a nearby box. Hidaka then claps and says that fainting the men should be enough. He then faces Nemu and asks if she's okay. When she doesn't respond, Hidaka says he saw her get taken and showed up to save her. So he offers his hand while telling her not to worry and announces that he's getting her out. Meanwhile, Sierra and Yu had taken out the guard and waved at Hidaka when he stepped out with Nemu. Hidaka then introduces himself, and Nemu does the same. After the ladies join and introduce themselves, Sierra asks Nemu if she knows where her home is. In response, Nemu says she lives with some sisters, so Sierra figures she must be from the church. While Hidaka wonders what she means, Sierra explains that it's an orphanage where they temporarily look after orphans. Since Nemu looks like one of their orphans, they took her back to the orphanage. On entering the building, Nemu spots a sister and runs towards her. Surprised, the sister catches Nemu and asks where she has been. In response, Nemu reveals that she was caught by a scary person but was saved by Hidaka. Just then, the sister looks up and spots Hidaka and the ladies. Afterwards, while they had tea, the sister expressed her gratitude and said she didn't know how to repay them. However, Hidaka tells her not to bother as long as Nemu is fine. The sister then explains that she thought it was safe for Nemu to go play with her friends since people don't discriminate in the royal capital. She then states that she was wrong since Nemu got caught by a slave merchant, an activity which was banned at the time. Hearing this, Hidaka asks about the ban, and Sierra explains that selling slaves is prohibited in Rajosen. She then adds that some people still engage in this activity, and Nemu would have been taken if they hadn't noticed. After this, Hidaka asks the sister if she knows what's on Nemu's arm, but since she looks surprised, they check the arm and realize that Nemu has been branded. Suddenly, the sister breaks down in tears and points out that she was branded with a slave's crest. Sierra then explains that it's a crest that merchants carve into slaves to prove their identity. In addition to this, she states that it's common among male slaves, but Nemu was branded because she's a beast folk. Although the crest has no special effect, the branded slaves give up running. Hearing this, Hidaka thinks about the slave traders and wonders how many lives they've destroyed. Although he let Sierra handle it, Hidaka figures he should have slain the slave merchants on the spot. Just then, Toa touches Hidaka and asks if he's okay since he's making a scary face. Sierra then tells him to quit worrying and leave the rest to her since she has contacted Annette. Afterward, when they prepare to leave, Nemu looks depressed, so Hidaka tells her to be careful and avoid going out on her own. Just then, Hidaka says he'll see her the next day and wave as they leave. Toa then asks if he actually plans to visit the next day, but Hidaka says that Nemu will have forgotten about him the next day. Which of the ladies would you wife if you were Hidaka? Let's know in the comments. If you like anime recaps like this, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.